to the Christmas special of Gar Borras' Time Machine. And for this special, Gar, we're going all the way back to 1946, and we're going to be talking all about the classic Christmas film, It's a Wonderful Life. Now, you were telling me this is one of your all-time favorite Christmas movies, so let's go back in time all the way to 1946, get in your time machine, and tell us how you were first exposed to the film.
Well, it was just one of those things where, it was real popular when I was a kid, way back in the 60s, to watch TV, because TV was kind of new back in those days.
Yeah.
It wasn't brand new, but
fairly
new.
Yeah.
It was still fairly new.
Yeah.
So there was just because it was so new and it was so popular and everybody just loved it. There was a lot of that. There was a lot of when I was a kid, coming home from school and get your homework done and watch some TV.
Yeah.
And it just seemed that it just was a natural thing that I started noticing that every Christmas they would show this movie, and I started watching it, and I just loved the movie, and I just wound up watching it every Christmas, and it's just been a tradition ever since, even to this day.
Yeah.
I still watch that movie, sometime before Christmas. A lot of times, I used to watch it when I was wrapping presents for the kids on Christmas Eve. So, I'd be wrapping presents and watching the movie, and every year at the very end of the movie, I would wind up getting all weepy and cry, sentimental. Yeah,
it's funny, we're talking about this, 2021 marks the 75th anniversary of the film, if you can believe it's that old, but interestingly, in doing the research today on this, Gar, I come to find out, like, a lot of the stuff that we've talked about, for example, Star Trek, the original TV series, or Twilight Zone, which we talked about last time when we did this. This particular film kind of got a new life, speaking of television, once they started airing it every year on television. Now, here's an interesting thing about that. When it was initially released, in the movie theaters, it really failed at the box office. It was not all that popular. An interesting thing, what happened is in 1974, they allowed the copyright to expire. They weren't staying on top of that, and so for the next 20 years, it kind of remained in the public domains, which means anybody was able to air it on any TV station or anything. With they wouldn't get any royalties or anything for it. Nobody would, but anybody that wanted to air that movie on TV on any station, they were allowed to do that for up until 1994, and because of that, it got a new popularity once people started seeing this every year at Christmas on television.
Yes, well, I mean, it's also, it's considered one of the greatest movies ever made.
Yeah.
So, when you combine that, how really good the movie is and how heartwarming it is and everything, and then you take away the restrictions that would keep it out of the public's domain, then it just wound up flourishing and really kind of creating a second life for the movie. But yeah, you're right that when the movie came out, even though it was nominated for like a whole bunch of Academy Awards and everything, the movie was really never a numbers success.
Yeah.
As far as numbers go. But it just seems that seems to be the story with
a lot of things.
with a lot of things that became hugely iconic and hugely successful. When they first started it, it was not successful, and then somehow later on it winds up having kind of creating a life of its own.
Yeah, so we should also mention, okay, the release date of this film was December 20th, 1946. So again, just a few days before Christmas, and that's probably the reason it's become such a Christmas tradition. And so 1946, we should note, is also, talking historically, right after, the war. And so people are kind of having all that to deal with, and they have this film and stuff. Now, the film itself was directed by Frank Capra, and of course it stars Jimmy Stewart and Donna Reed. But I was reading that originally RKO Studios, everyone that bought the film rights, and they originally wanted to have Cary Grant, but he didn't end up doing it. They ended up getting Jimmy Stewart. Just think about that for a minute. Yeah.
I think Cary Grant was partially behind discovering the story and actually bringing it to RKO.
Yeah.
And that's I guess that has a lot to do with why they were originally considering him for the main character. Because it's kind of trippy how you can have people like an actor in the business having an eye for something and then bringing it to his superiors or the people that he works for,
yeah,
and bringing it to their attention. It just kind of really kind of shows you how I guess Cary Grant had an eye for pieces of work that could had potential.
Yeah, and RK Studios, I also want to note that that's not just some fly-by-night studio at the time. This is one of the premier studios, and probably the biggest thing they'd done before that was in 1933 they did the original King Kong. So that's the same people putting out this film.
Well, they were a large part of Culver City.
Yeah.
I'm sure when they closed down RKO Studios, it's all houses now, and and people that live there have no idea that they live in a house that used to be RKO Studios.
Yeah, and so
kind of trippy to think about that. How as time goes along, and you can live somewhere and you have absolutely no idea that you're standing on the same ground as all these famous actors and actresses when they were making movies and stuff like that way back when.
Yeah, and It's a Wonderful Life, it says, is a 1946 American Christmas film that was based on a short story called The Greatest Gift by Philip Van Doren Stern, which he self-published in 1943. So the original story that this thing is based on came out 3 years before in 1943, and that short story, from what I understand, was actually based on Charles Dickens's classic Christmas Carol.
Yes, and you can, when that was pointed out to me, it became kind of obvious because it's almost like the opposite of A Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Where where you have you still have the bah humbug character, but he's Mr. Potter, but instead of working for an oppressive, greedy, that whole thing, he's a person that lives in a town that basically becomes by default the person that people in the town go to, so they don't have to go to Potter.
Yeah, and what's funny about that, and I didn't even see this when I was watching the film, is Supposedly, back in the day when the film first came out, the director had to go eventually, I guess, and testify before Congress because the FBI went all the way to the trouble of putting out a memo that they felt this film was a communist propaganda film. Can you believe that?
Well, yeah, at that time, communism was the all-time
evil,
in the world at that time. I can't express how much it was considered an evil. I mean, look at the witch hunt that happened in the 50s with McCarthy, using pointing the finger communist, at people and completely ruining people's lives and stuff like that.
Yeah.
When you look back in history and you see things like that, it's kind of really makes you aware of how much our society at that time considered communism the ultimate. I mean, the absolute ultimate of evil.
And a friend of mine said they recently saw a film that's out in the theaters. I haven't seen it. It's called Being the Ricardos, based on the life of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, and they were saying how back in the day, around the time of I Love Lucy, she was being accused of being a communist.
Well, and but then again, you have a
belief,
a mixed marriage.
Yeah.
Back in the 1950s, which also was, actually illegal at that time.
Wow. Yeah.
Did you know that?
I didn't know that. Wow.
Back in the 1950s, mixed marriages were illegal. Wow,
I had no idea. Wow.
Against the law.
Just think about that. And and I was reading the film's budget was $3.18 million. The box office sales were only $3.3 million. Not too bad, I guess. But in those days, that was considered breaking even.
Yeah, you look at the budgets of movies now.
Yeah.
It's just, inflation has changed so much from back in those days, and just as another one of those indicators, when George Bailey in the movie was being offered $20,000 a year to work for Mr. Potter, when Potter was offering him that job, the $20,000 a year was considered like rich.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Very, very wealthy, and by today's standards, $20,000 a year is poverty.
Oh yeah.
So it's just just shows you the difference between inflation, how it's occurred since then. It's just things have changed a lot
since then. Oh, no doubt.
But I think the reason why I gravitated towards it is because the movie had a lot of really positive qualities. The sentimental, the good triumphing over evil. Personal characteristic traits, having watched that movie for so many years, I kind of almost have used that movie as an example of the bar of the type of person that I want to be, that I'm always trying to strive for. I've always wanted to be
that guy,
like a George Bailey, and unfortunately, not successfully. I would say that I'm far from a George Bailey, but it's always been, something, that I've always, used as that bar, and always had a desire to try to strive for.
Yeah, and what's interesting is George Bailey is kind of, if you watch the film, he is portrayed as that type of character where, he's got a well-to-do life, he's well off, and everybody would love to be that guy and not have no worries in life. But at the same time, you watch the film, you're kind of thinking, okay, here's a guy, but he's loaded, he's got money, he's well off, and yet he's not totally happy. In other words, as great as life is going for George Bailey, he's always kind of, putting.
He was actually struggling.
That's what I mean. He would always put the well-being of the town and other people before his own. I mean, even when you get to the point of a film where he's decided he's gonna leave this little town, Bedford Falls. He's gonna go off to college, but it never really works out. He never makes it to college because he puts the need of the town before his own needs.
Well, and then also you kind of look at it, and there's still things about the human condition that hasn't changed. I think that all young people that are in their 20s have big hopes and big dreams of what they want to achieve, in their lives.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's everyone when they're young has these, big hopes and big dreams, just like George Bailey. He wanted to see the world. He wanted to do big things. He wanted to achieve. He wanted, you know what I mean? There was a desire for him to do things that would make a difference
in his own life.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But he always wound up getting the short end of the stick because he would never think of himself first. He was always such an unselfish person that many times he gave up what he wanted for the benefit of others. Other people that he loved.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't just some stranger. These were people that he cared very much about, and so because he cared so much about them, that he was willing to give up his dreams for other people.
Yeah.
And he was such an unselfish person.
Yeah,
his character was such an unselfish person that when he wound up getting in trouble,
nobody was there for him. Nobody was there.
All these people that he made such a huge difference in their lives for the better and everything. They wound up mobilizing and coming to his aid when he needed it.
Yeah.
So it's just a beautiful story. It's a really, really beautiful story that has everything to do with, how people should be, towards one another.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. And the other pivotal moment comes in George's life when he's known this girl Mary ever since they were kids, and they've been like sweethearts for many years, and it's kind of thing you see in life where these two people, they kind of belong together. There's kind of this chemistry, but they both kind of deny it, or one denies it more than the other. Where I think, he loved her for all these years, but he took her for granted. And then only when he seen that she was going out with another guy did he get kind of jealous and think, I better kind of latch on to her before I let her get away, And then that's kind of how they come together in the film, finally get married.
Well, the guy that was trying to flirt with her in the movie, only the older generation will really know who that person is, because the person that plays that character in the movie, the guy that was trying to flirt with Mary, the the girl that eventually became George's wife. That guy was a super famous, I mean, hugely famous child actor back in the 1930s. Our Gang.
Oh, you know, and I'm not surprised knowing that RKO Studios, it was behind this, because they're originally the studio that produced all the Little Rascal films.
Yes, Our Gang, Little Rascals.
Yeah.
And he was Alfalfa, you know, the kid that had the hair that went to a pointy needle on the top of his head. That kid Alfalfa was the same person that played that character of the young man that was trying to flirt with George, with Mary.
And then,
you know.
Oh, I didn't even.
And that pool.
Yeah.
That pool is at Beverly Hills High School.
Oh, wow, I didn't even realize that.
And that pool is still functional, where the basketball court opens and everything like that, and the pool becomes, exposed. It all opens up just like that. Yeah,
you know, that's why I do this with you, Gar, because I done a ton of research on this, and in my research, I had no idea who that guy was that you just said. Now, interesting enough, I don't know if you are aware of it. The guy that played Alfalfa, sadly, I think it was in the early 90s, he was murdered or something, so he kind of, life came to a tragic end for him, sadly.
That's too bad, because back in the 1930s, Little Rascals was like, I mean, that was that was the shiz back in those days, man. Everybody loved Little Rascals, and the star of the show was Alfalfa.
I mean, they were like the premier child actors, you know.
Yes, I think that was kind of the very beginning of child actors.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is too, I was reading that Frank Capra, the director we mentioned, Jimmy Stewart, and Donna Reed, they all said that It's a Wonderful Life, of all the films they did in their career, all three of them agreed that was their favorite film. So much on Frank Capra's part that this became a tradition, like we're talking about, a Christmas tradition, watch this every year at Christmas time, where he would sit down every Christmas with his family and screen the film. It became a tradition with them.
Well, Frank Capra was always known as making very sentimental movies, and he was famous for that. And I think people, because It's a Wonderful Life wasn't as successful as his other movies, people were thinking that he lost his touch. When he made It's a Wonderful Life, but it's kind of funny to look in retrospect. Now people were actually thinking that this is the end for him. He's lost his touch, and then many decades later, the movie is considered one of the greatest movies ever made.
Oh yeah, and so much so that I was reading that like you're saying, this kind of gave Frank Capra a second kind of kind of takeoff of his career, because he was seen as washed up. And in fact, for many years, he considered himself to be a failure until this movie came out. But and a lot of people are saying, how could that guy consider himself a failure?
Well, sometimes artists hold themselves to a
higher bar,
extremely high bar, but that's the reason why they achieve so much, is because they put the bar so high.
Yeah. And kind of just along the lines of what you were just saying, I was reading, It's a Wonderful Life is now considered one of the greatest films of all time. It was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, as you mentioned. The American Film Institute has named It's a Wonderful Life on their list of their 100 best American films ever, and it made the ranking of number 20. So out of 100 films, it's at number 20 on the American Film Institute's list. That's a pretty good ranking there, 75 years later.
Well, nobody gave it
a chance. Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? It wasn't something that was given. It was actually something that just took its natural course, and that's the way the chips fell.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which is a good thing. Usually when say that's the way the chips fell, they're referring to it as a bad thing.
Yeah.
But in this case, it's that's the way that it just turned. It wound up turning out that way organically.
Yeah, yeah.
On its own, just by natural. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then there's another thing. There was the same backlash about the movie, and accusing it of having a communist outlook. Also had to do with the fact that they were considering the role of the bad guy in the movie was the rich and greedy.
Yeah, well, that's the world sometimes,
And that was supposed to, at that time, back in the 1940s and 1950s, we were supposed to hold our super wealthy in revere like royalty.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? And because this movie was, portraying, the ultra rich as rich and greedy and in a bad light.
Wow.
That had a lot to do with the communist backlash that happened at that time. Because if anybody didn't like anything, all they had to do was point at it and say communist.
Wow, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's all you had to do back in those days was just point your finger and say communist.
Yeah.
And now there's a world of whole nightmare that's been flung on you. And like I've said many times in the interviews that I've done with you, society is very fickle. And what is determined as completely unacceptable by society at one time, and sometimes it doesn't even take that long, and now all of a sudden society is completely flip-flopped, and that's now what they used to consider horribly wrong is now wonderful.
Yeah, and then at the same time, back then, a lot of people were what you would say put on a blacklist. Blacklisted, meaning if anybody even thought you were a communist, you would never work in the entertainment business again. It's not done like that anymore, thank God, like it was back then.
There's a lot of I think defamation of character
what's going on.
Was born from these type of things. You know what I mean? Just to protect the innocent from being accused, and see, back in those days, there was a lot of people that were accused of being communists back in those days, and just the actual accusation was enough
to kill a career,
to ruin them. To completely ruin them. Not the fact that it was ever proven, just the fact that you were accused.
Just a thought,
could be enough to ruin you. So it was a very different time. A lot of people's lives were ruined back in those times. Just because they were accused of being communist. And it's crazy, but that's not exactly something that as Americans we all should be really proud of. You know what I mean? I don't think those are really good human qualities, but that's the reason why I gravitated towards this movie, is because I really don't. I reject those kind of qualities, and I reject those type of thinkings. I I prefer to strive to be a good person. I prefer to strive to be a person like George Bailey.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I don't think I'm ever going to give up on trying to strive for that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't think I hope I'll somewhere along the line I'll be able to achieve it.
Well, we're all
that kind of person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's what I want to grasp onto. I want to be a good person. I want to be positive, have a positive effect on other people.
Yeah.
There's so much about George Bailey that rings to what I want to be myself.
Yeah, well, I was having this discussion with somebody the other day where basically, most people are pretty good, decent at heart, but here's the thing. We're all a work in progress. There's always room to improve. People like to joke around and, I know everything. Nobody's perfect. Nobody knows everything. But even like in these shows you and I do, I mean, I could kind of, we could do these shows. I could kind of go through each episode kind of BSing, but then people go, this guy doesn't know, he doesn't even know what he's talking about, doesn't research anything. And so we want to come across as somewhat credible. So we at least find out what year was the film released, what was going on in the world. You help kind of, build opinions and stuff. And so you got to do little stuff, and we're always a work in progress is what I like to say. But, talking about It's a Wonderful Life, for the most part, it's a pretty feel-good film, but then where it kind of takes a turn is the point in the film where George has kind of gotten to a point where a lot of people got in their life, kind of nothing is going right, or so it seems to them at the time, and they want to just kind of give up on life. And I think George says some effect of, I wish I was dead, or I wish I feel like killing myself, or whatever. And then he gets a visit from this angel named Clarence, who I was reading. Supposedly Clarence is like a fallen angel, which equivalent of the devil. He's trying to earn his wings. So Clarence gets sent to have a talk with George and kind of make George realize, okay, maybe you didn't really mean what you say. Maybe you should look at what you said there. And kind of shows George what life would be like if he was no longer here. And then he kind of gets a glimpse of that, and he's like, no, I want to be here with Mary and my kids. And so I think this is one of the first films to kind of even kind of tackle suicide, or somebody even contemplating suicide, and it's an interesting way they went about doing it.
You're right about that, because back in the mid 40s, suicide was a very taboo subject.
Yeah, I mean, now you talk about suicide, you talk about people, calling the suicide hotline, or going to get therapy, or seeking help. Where back in this time, if you even thought that you were gonna even made any kind of statement about wanting to kill yourself, you were considered crazy and stuff like that. And that guy, he's out of his mind. But they know a lot more about it, obviously, all these years later. I mean, we're talking 75 years later, so of course people are still contemplating suicide, but there's a lot more help for people like that now than there was 75 years ago.
A lot more help, but yet there's still so much suicide still going on.
Yeah.
Even though there's so much more help available and everything, it's kind of just an observation. It is. I don't have some major statement to make about that. Just an observation.
Well, I can tell you, and I'm referencing some guy I never even met, but Mike Howe, the singer from Metal Church, back in July, it was announced he committed suicide, and you have a lot of his bandmates and people who knew him. They were coming online and telling it's kind of weird. This guy always had a smile on his face. He always seemed like he was so happy. None of us really had a clue what he must have been going through, and to kind of do this, this came as a total surprise. So again, a lot of times when people are going through stuff, they try to hide it, they mask it, and that's why if you see anybody in your life kind of even struggling with that, you got to kind of say, hey, you need to talk or whatever. But oftentimes people are just when a loved one kind of finally carries out that act and they take their own life. So often you hear, he seemed like he was so happy. We had no idea that he was struggling or anything.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think it's just something that's just part of our society, you know, that I don't think that, you know, anybody is really, you know, going to be able to have any answers for.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because, I think on a situation like that, it's all on an individual basis. You can't talk about suicide as a blanket, you know, problem with a blanket solution. You know what I mean? But back in the mid 1940s, you know, I wouldn't even be surprised if back in the mid 40s, suicide was against the law.
Yeah, who knows?
Literally against the law.
Yeah, who knows? And I think the title, "It's a Wonderful Life," is very fitting because, like I said, for the most part, except for where George gets to the point where he wants to kind of give up on life and he's contemplating suicide, it's a feel-good movie. And then even after kind of going through that part of the film, what makes it a wonderful life is, you know, how many times in life do people actually get a chance, like, to kind of take a look at what life would be like if you were to carry this thing, you know, thing out of, you know, killing yourself or whatever. We really don't get that kind of experience. And a lot of times, stuff like, you know, okay, it's a movie, so you can make it kind of happen. And then in the end, George kind of realizes kind of, you know, the statement he made, like, and he kind of gets a new lease on life, if you will. And that's how the movie ends. And kind of he's back with his family and his kids, and everything's so wonderful. They wrap it up in a nice little bow. That's not how life always works out, unfortunately. But, you know, oftentimes in the movie, you can wrap it up like that, and anybody watching the film, you know, you might start to get depressed. Oh, this guy's going to kill himself, or he's thinking about. But by the time the movie's in, everybody's happy again.
Well, you know, it's an example that he never realized how much of a positive influence he had on everyone in that town. And that's, you know, that was the whole thing, is he was so wrapped up into the negativity, kind of like not being able to see the forest for all those darn trees.
Yeah, and I think
you know
the other thing with all this
he was so wrapped up into the negativity that he couldn't see what he had done to be such a positive influence on virtually everyone else in that, you know, the town that he was trying to get away from. And trying to grow out of.
And another thing kind of dawned on me when I was watching the film is another message I got was kind of like, okay, not only is this guy contemplating suicide, and he kind of gets, you know, a new lease on life finally, and he's kind of things. He gets to the point where he realized, you know what, I don't have it so bad. You know, like I've often thought, you know, I'm lucky to have my friends and family. There are people out there that don't even have it that good. They're really all alone in the world. They don't have a single friend, a single family member, you know, to talk to. And so a lot of times you got to kind of look around and tell yourself, you know, there's somebody worse off than me. And I think in this movie, George kind of realized, you know what, I have a lot to be thankful for. And not just, you know, all his riches and his money and stuff, but he realized, you know, I got a family. And how lucky he is to have his kids and his wife, you know, and then that's how the film ends.
Well, and another thing, you know, that was endearing about the movie for me was the relationship between him and Mary, because you know, they struggled. You know, they weren't living like a rich life. They were living in an old broken down house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That, you know, that when they first moved in after they got married was leaking all over the place when it was raining.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? So you know, but what was endearing about that was you know that, you know, they stayed together. You know what I mean? She, you know, he was doing the best that he could to be that provider and everything like that for the family. And there was a lot of times it got frustrating for him and everything like that. But the last thing, that anybody was thinking about in the movie was divorce.
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring that up is because nowadays it's just like anytime you have people in relationships that, things get a little dicey, immediately they just back in those days, marriages were not disposable. And you stuck together through thick and thin. And nowadays, people don't stick together through thick and thin, and marriages are considered disposable now.
Yeah.
So I would never encourage somebody to stay married to somebody that they're miserable with.
Yeah. That's not good either.
Somebody that's abusive.
Yeah.
If two people are together, and part of being in a relationship is making it through the storms.
Oh yeah, and I never really thought about that watching the film until just now when you said that. But could you imagine being married? And you marry this guy who he's really rich and well off, and you think you're gonna be set for life, and then as great as all that is, what you kind of just touched upon is so you think once you marry George that you're gonna be set for life, but then he's using his wealth and his money to help, I guess you could say, the less fortunate or people that are less fortunate, and you're like, I could see a lot of women thinking, hey, what about me over here? I'm supposed to be your wife. You're supposed to be taking care of me. You're taking care of all these other people. In the real world, a lot of women would not put up with that. They'd say, hey, what about your family over here?
Well, that was another one of those things that I picked up over all of these years of watching the movie both George and Mary were great examples of doing whatever you can to stick together.
Yeah. When you and I were growing up,
and it's that that's just not the way that things are nowadays. Like if people are in a relationship and the guy loses his job, she dumps him.
Yeah,
and that's the scenario nowadays. It's just very, very, very different. The moral standards that used to be. Now, it's not all the way the moral standards was not the end all, because there was downsides to those moral standards back in those days too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I just think that we live in a time nowadays where we live in extremely easily disposable relationships.
Yeah, when you and I were growing up, the word divorce was like a scarlet letter. And I heard years ago in an interview John Fogerty, the singer from Creedence Clearwater Revival, talking about when he was a kid and his parents got divorced after being married for several years, and he's like, all of a sudden, you'd see the neighbors pointing and everything, and those are the people they got divorced, and he was saying how
the social stigma.
You couldn't even talk about it back in the day, and the other thing I think we should, before we wrap this up, Gar, talk about is kind of the technical aspect of the film, as far as first of all, like a lot of these classic films we talked about, it was in black and white, but oddly enough, when you and I kind of were talking about doing a Christmas special, and we decided to do it on It's a Wonderful Life, I was in Target. I just happened to be in the DVD section, and they had all their Christmas movies on sale, and there's It's a Wonderful Life. And when I picked up, it happened to have it's a 2-disc set, and you get all these special features, and you get on the Blu-ray, you get like a colored version, and then you get on the DVD like the original black and white. And I watched both versions. It's kind of trippy because it's the same movie, and yet even though I like stuff in color, maybe because it's been in black and white all these years, it kind of looked hokey to me. But part of the reason they're offering that up, from what I understand, in the little documentary they have on the DVD, is that again, this is a film that's 75 years old, and so as films age, they gotta like restore the film, because otherwise, like on It's a Wonderful Life, there were some frames in the film that were getting kind of faded. People could not see some of these frames of the film, so they went back and restored, and it looks like, just timeless. But so that's one thing they went back and did. I was reading about the colorization when the copyright expired back in 1970. Frank Capra wanted to kind of colorize it because that was a new thing that was popular to do at the time. But once the copyright expired, he was not allowed to do that. But all these years later, 75 years later, you can get it in color now if you like.
I think I have the colorized version and the black and white, and of course I prefer the black and white myself.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Can I point out something?
Sure.
That's another one of those little weird little tidbits.
Yeah, sure. That's what we're doing this for.
The guy that played the policeman that was friends with George Bailey.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. What's his name? Ernie. Okay, that was the guy that played the cop. The guy that played the taxi driver, which was the taxi driver friend of George Bailey, and both of those guys, they were all three friends, was named Ernie. Now think about that. Bert and Ernie.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
So I have this gut feeling that the Sesame Street characters were named off after those two characters in It's a Wonderful Life. I'm pretty sure that the Ernie, Bert, and there's Ernie.
Who knows? But I was also reading that there have been other like adaptations of It's a Wonderful Life, where TV shows would even do for example, I was reading, I think it was 1995, when they had a Muppet Christmas movie talk about the Muppets. Kermit the Frog and Miss Piggy, they kind of do like a couple scenes from It's a Wonderful Life, and Kermit's supposed to play the part of George Bailey where he's acting depressed and everything. And so even like the Muppets kind of do their version of It's a Wonderful Life. And again, that's talking about the legacy the film has, all these years later, where other people kind of want to do their version of it.
Well, and here's another little tidbit.
Mm-hmm.
The Mr. Potter, the actor that played Mr. Potter was Lionel Barrymore, who was the grandfather, I believe,
Drew?
Possibly even
Drew?
Yes.
Yeah.
Drew Barrymore is related to Lionel Barrymore. He's either a grandfather or an uncle or something like that. But no, the Barrymore family has been a very famous acting family for many, many decades before Drew was ever born.
Yeah. And now a couple other things we should talk about before we wrap up this episode. The small town in the movie is called Bedford Falls, which is a made-up town. But interesting enough, Bedford Falls was made up of a town the film takes place in, and the film was shot in Culver City, as you were saying, Gar, on the 89-acre RKO movie ranch. So again, in Culver City, people may not even realize that's where and so we're talking about a film that was made in Culver City. And I was also reading because Frank Capra, the director, wanted to make the film look so real. He didn't just want to have made up, you just want to have just fake snow or anything. He wanted to really look like it was real snow. And you watch, and what's funny is I was reading, it was filmed, those scenes in the snow were like filmed like during the a major heat wave. So it was so hot that one day they had to kind of shut down the production. But to make the snow, they used they made like a little they use these chemicals and what soap flakes, foam-like, and sugar, which mixed together created a chemical snow. So they went so much to the trouble of creating this formula to create the snow, just so they had snow that looks so real. And again, keep in mind that it was filmed
and it sure does look real. Did you know that the one Academy Award that they won for the movie
special effects
was that snow?
Yeah.
That special effect, because it was a game changer for movies in recreating snow, in environments that aren't cold. Like Southern California, where it never snows.
Yeah.
But the actual snow that you're talking about, that chemical mixture and everything like that, it wasn't like a toxic chemical mixture, but it was a game changer, and that was what they actually won an Academy Award for, was that actual effect of the snow.
And from what I understand, like you said, before this film, they really had no idea how to do this, and I guess they went to the extra kind of research to learn how to do this. And after It's a Wonderful Life, that's how a lot of these other film crews would do snow now, and it's because of this film, Yep.
And game changer.
Yeah, and then we should also note that I was reading that It's a Wonderful Life is kind of that's the film that actually launched Donna Reed's career. This was, I guess, her first starring role. She'd done other things before, but this is her first kind of movie where she was in the lead.
Well, she was perfect. If you ask me, she was perfect for the part.
I agree. Now, Gar, I don't know if there's anything else you want to have to say about It's a Wonderful Life. It's just a great film, and it's a great annual kind of tradition. And like I said, I picked up the DVD because I hadn't seen the film in years, and it's one of those things I think is going to kind of become a tradition in my house now, watching once a year. It's just that good of a film. But before we wrap it up, it's going to be Christmas time, and so I was curious, what are some of your other kind of favorite Christmas movies to watch?
Scrooged.
Yeah, that's a good one.
With Bill Murray, I just love it. It's extremely well done. It's funny. There's just absolutely phenomenal side characters. In Scrooged, it's very. Scrooged has many dimensions to it, but the whole thing is just like It's a Wonderful Life. When it gets to the end, I get all sentimental and teary-eyed and everything like that. Same thing with Scrooged. At the very end, when the little boy says, "And God bless us, everyone." Yeah. And again, how can anyone not get all choked up? With that scene, it's just I have this real deep sentimental side, which I think has a lot to do with the reason why I really enjoy doing these interviews with you. And going down memory lane is because I've got such a deep sentimental side.
I mean, and even in the research, like things come up. Like I mentioned today, I kind of discovered, okay, wait, RKO Studios, they did The Little Rascals, they did King Kong from 1933. So as we're talking today, I'm thinking those are future episodes. And I gotta say, as far as my all-time probably favorite, I never get sick of, no matter how many times I see it, is Chevy Chase's Christmas Vacation. I mean, that's a crazy family, and we've all seen dads like that they just go all out, and like favorite part of the movie is where he finally gets the Christmas lights to work, and he's like, yes, I did it, nonstop laughter. Do you enjoy listening to Christmas music?
All the old stuff.
Yeah.
You know, the Dean Martin, the Frank Sinatra, the Mel Torme, you know, all of that stuff is my favorite as far as like Christmas. But then, you know, there's also can't forget about Christmas Story. You know, actually that movie really kind of embraces what Christmas was like when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know, when you went to the Christmas tree farm and you picked out a Christmas tree and you know, Dad, you know, a lot of kids can relate to their dad being like the dad in that movie.
Yeah.
And
maybe next year we'll have to do that one. Yeah.
The gun that he wanted for his Christmas present, you know, and but you know that movie really does embrace what Christmas was like when I was a kid.
Yeah, and you know what's funny about that is that film. I think you know the main kid in it. I think that's the main thing he's remembered for in his career. I think he's still among the living, as they say, but. Whenever anybody brings up his name, it's for that movie, Christmas Story, and I don't think he's done much since. But here's the thing: that's not a bad legacy, especially if you consider if that's the biggest thing that kid ever did. You know, however many years it is later, we're still talking about it. You know, that's pretty good.
I hope it, you know, goes on for many years, you know, even beyond.
Yeah.
You know, his life. You know, it's a wonderful story. The leg lamp in the window is priceless.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
But you know, you can't. You know, and then I don't know if I would really consider it a Christmas movie, even though I watch it during this time of year.
Yeah.
I'd say it's more of a Thanksgiving movie.
Okay.
Trains, Planes, and Automobiles.
Oh yeah.
You know, it's just a wonderful holidays movie that there's just no way that you can watch that movie and not die laughing.
And then that's of course
it is a masterpiece for comedy.
Yeah, I think that's one. That's one too for a future episode because that of course starring Steve Martin, who I don't think he acts all that much. He does a lot more. He's a script writer and he writes books and plays, so that's a lot more what he's doing. And then of course it also features the late great John Candy. And then I also wanted to make a recommendation as far as Christmas music. As somebody else's recommendation, I just picked up. There's a Billy Idol Christmas album, if you can believe it, called Happy Holidays, and it's got all your favorites. Billy kind of doing his rockin' version of it, but it stays pretty true. Like you get Frosty the Snowman, Winter Wonderland on Christmas Day, and again, this is cool because of what it is. It's Billy Idol, and you don't really think of Billy Idol as doing Christmas music, but for what it is, I put on the album, and it's pretty cool.
Well, he's got the perfect voice for doing, for doing that kind, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? A lot of people, might not see it, but I see it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, he's got the perfect voice for pulling off, those kind of songs.
Yeah, and final question for you today, Gar. Because while we're on the subject of Christmas, I was curious. Do you have any special Christmas memory you like to share with us, or anything from throughout your life that kind of just always you kind of love to think back on?
I think my first exposure to rock music is associated with Christmas.
Oh, wow.
And even though I didn't receive it as the gift, my sister received it as a gift. Mm-hmm. But it was she got Led Zeppelin 2.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
The one that I believe Led Zeppelin 2 has Whole Lotta Love.
I think so, yeah. And so once your sister got... Yeah.
And, before that, I really didn't know what rock and roll was.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't know that, that music came out back in the late 60s.
Yeah.
a lot of people, associate Led Zeppelin with the 70s,
Yeah.
But they actually launched and their career started in the late 60s, which in the late 60s that music was considered heavy metal.
Oh wow!
At that time, it definitely was considered very heavy metal, and so I associate my first exposure to hard rock, heavy metal, that kind of thing. And it was Whole Lot of Love, because when you listen to that, that is such a heavy guitar riff.
Yeah, and what was it? What was it about that music, or that particular album, that really kind of
Well, there wasn't a lot of guitarists that were playing with distortion.
Yeah.
It was, but it was in its infancy, and there wasn't a lot of it going on. So it was a real, distortion was a game changer, because it just added toughness to a sound.
Yeah,
and that whole rock, hit you in the jaw, kind of thing.
And how much of an influence?
And you can't have music hitting you in the jaw without the music having distortion.
And how much of an influence was John Paul Jones on you growing up to be the bass player that you are?
He was a huge influence on me. Huge influence. I just, but then also, you listen to Robert Plant, and nobody was singing like that back then.
And nobody's singing like that today. And and we'll just wrap it up with this, Gar. As far as I got a lot of great Christmas memories, especially from my childhood. But I'll tell you, what really stands out to me the older I get is Christmas Eve was always a big kind of celebration at my family's house, and the older I get, kind of sadly, like a lot of us, a lot of old people are no longer here. So you kind of miss the good old days. As far as I wish they were still here, but their memory lives on because we talk about them like they're still here, and so you can never take away the memories, as you say.
Just those sentimental things like the old Christmas trees that were made out. It looked. I don't know how to describe it. It was
Well, I'll just say this for me.
The stuff that you put, or the garland that you put around, the silver garland.
Yeah.
Well, they used to make Christmas trees
out of that
silver, and the whole Christmas tree would be silver.
Wow.
So when you put the lights on it, the lights would reflect off of the silver. They were fake trees.
Yeah.
But they were real popular back in the 1960s.
Yeah.
And it almost looked like a tinfoil type of the shiny part of tinfoil, but it was the whole Christmas tree was like that. And I remember being at my aunt and uncle's house, where the whole family's getting together to exchange gifts and stuff, and they had this light that would shine. It would have a red, green, and blue thing that would go in a circle, and the light would shine through it. And so the tree would turn red, and then it would change over to green, and then the tree would turn green.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then it would go over to blue, and the tree would turn blue. And so, this is like old school 1960s Christmas, which is very different from, what it's like nowadays.
I mean, now, yeah.
All of that stuff has become kind of lost.
Yeah, now,
but,
yeah.
when I think of Christmas, of course, what does anybody do? They think of Christmas, what it was like when they were a kid.
Yeah, yeah.
And, it was, the Christmas trees back in the 60s were priceless.
Yeah, I agree. And, sadly, they got what's called the war on Christmas, where you hear these people getting so woke that they want to tell everyone you're not even allowed to say, not Merry Christmas, we got to say Happy Holidays. No, Merry Christmas. I'm going to keep saying that. And like you said, those are the days you wish you could go back to, Gar. Now, I just tell the people for the episode we just did here about It's a Wonderful Life, we're going to have that up in time for Christmas. So that should be going up in the next 2 or 3 days. And then since that's a Christmas special, we're going to post that first, and then we're going to post our Twilight Zone we did last week. And when you and I return to do this in 2 weeks from now, right after the holidays, we're going to do an episode on Happy Days, which you and I have talked several times about being one of our favorite all-time.
Gotta do it.
Yeah? I mean,
gotta do it.
All I will say in preference for that, before wishing you and your family a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, Gar, is, hey, keep it cool.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'd like to wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas. I hope you guys have a wonderful Christmas. And to anyone that listens to this,
yeah.
If you're having a Christmas like George Bailey, I hope everything turns out absolutely wonderful for you, just like it did for George Bailey. And I wish everyone in the world, anyone that hears this, and anyone that doesn't even hear this, an absolutely wonderful Christmas and a wonderful life.
Happy holidays, Gar. We'll be talking in a few weeks. Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.
You too.